When I married Marcus, I thought his mother Patricia was just protective of her only son. I excused her cold shoulder, her constant criticism, her way of making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. But when she violently shook my 3-week-old twins while I was recovering from a C-section, claiming they were spoiled brats who needed discipline, everything changed. What I didn't expect was my father, a retired Navy SEAL turned FBI agent, to make one phone call that would expose secrets about Patricia that even Marcus didn't know. Some mothers-in-law cross lines. Others cross into criminal territory. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. 3 weeks after giving birth to twins Emma and Ethan, I was still recovering from an emergency C-section that nearly killed me. The doctors said I was lucky to be alive, but lucky wasn't how I felt lying in bed at 2 a.m., listening to Patricia Whitmore tell my husband how I was failing as a mother already. Marcus had insisted his mother move in to help during my recovery. Help. That's what he called it when she reorganized my nursery without asking, threw away the organic baby formula I'd carefully selected, and replaced it with the cheapest brand from the grocery store. Babies don't need fancy stuff, Sarah, she'd said, not looking at me. They need structure. I was Sarah Mitchell now, though Patricia still introduced me as Marcus's wife to anyone who'd listen. Never by name. Never as part of the family. Just a temporary inconvenience attached to her precious son. The twins were fussy that Tuesday morning. Emma had been crying for 20 minutes straight, and Ethan wasn't far behind. My incision hurt. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch in weeks, and I was trying to figure out which baby to tend to first when Patricia walked into the nursery. "You're holding her wrong," she said, watching me cradle Emma. "No wonder. She won't stop crying." I adjusted my position, trying to find something that worked. Emma's cries got louder. "Here, let me show you how it's done." Patricia reached for my daughter before I could respond. Her grip was firm, possessive. "You young mothers think you know everything, but babies need a strong hand." Something in her tone made my skin crawl, but I was too exhausted to fight. Marcus was already at work. He'd gone back after just 5 days of paternity leave because Patricia convinced him the family business needed him more than his wife and newborns did. "My Marcus never cried like this," Patricia continued, bouncing Emma with more force than seemed necessary. I made sure of that early on. I watched her handle my daughter, noting how Emma seemed to cry harder instead of calming down. Patricia's jaw tightened. "Spoiled already," she muttered. "Just like her mother." That should have been my first real warning. Not the reorganized nursery or the replaced formula or the way she spoke about me like I wasn't standing right there. It should have been the look in her eyes when she said my daughter was spoiled. Cold. Calculating. Like she was planning to fix a problem. Instead, I just felt defeated. 3 weeks of constant criticism, 3 weeks of being told I was doing everything wrong, 3 weeks of watching my husband take his mother's side on every disagreement. I was starting to believe maybe I was failing. "I think I'll take a nap." "While they're settled," I said, hoping distance would help. The pain medication made me groggy anyway, and the twins seemed calmer when Patricia wasn't critiquing my every move. "Good idea," Patricia said, her voice suddenly sweet. "You rest, dear. I'll take care of everything." I should have stayed. I should have trusted the instinct that told me something was wrong with how she looked at my babies, how she talked about discipline for 3-week-old infants, how she seemed to take personal offense to their basic needs. Instead, I went to my bedroom and closed the door, grateful for a few minutes of quiet. I didn't know that quiet was about to become the most dangerous sound in my house. I woke up to Emma screaming. Not the normal fussy crying I'd gotten used to, this was different. Desperate. Terrified. I stumbled out of bed, my incision pulling as I moved too fast. The medication made everything feel underwater, but the sound of my daughter's distress cut through the fog like nothing else could. "Patricia?" I called, moving toward the nursery. "Is everything okay?" No answer. Emma's cries got louder. I found them in the living room. Patricia was holding Emma at arm's length, shaking her back and forth like she was trying to mix a cocktail. Emma's tiny head was snapping forward and back, her arms flailing helplessly. "What are you doing?" The words came out as a whisper because I couldn't process what I was seeing. Patricia didn't stop. "Teaching her not to be a brat," she said through gritted teeth. "Babies need to learn they can't manipulate people with crying." "Stop." I moved toward them, but Patricia stepped back. "This is exactly the problem," she snapped, still shaking Emma. "You coddle them. My generation knew how to raise proper children. She's 3 weeks old." I reached for my daughter, but Patricia pulled away again. 3 weeks is old enough to learn respect. Another violent shake. Emma's cries became weaker, more fragmented, something primal exploded in my chest. I lunged forward and grabbed Emma from Patricia's arms, pulling my daughter against my chest. Emma's little body was rigid with fear, her face red and blotchy from crying. "You don't ever touch my children like that," I said, my voice shaking. "Ever." Patricia straightened her cardigan like nothing had happened. "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. A little discipline never hurt anyone." "That wasn't discipline. That was abuse." Her eyes narrowed. "Abuse? You clearly don't know what real abuse looks like. I raised a successful son who provides for this family. What have you accomplished besides getting pregnant?" I stared at her, holding Emma closer. My daughter was finally calming down, but I could feel tremors in her tiny body. "Where's Ethan?" "Sleeping. Like babies should do instead of screaming. All day." I walked to the nursery, Patricia following behind me like she owned the place. Ethan was in his crib, awake but unusually quiet. His eyes tracked me as I approached, but something was off. He seemed subdued. Scared. "Did you shake him too?" I asked, picking up my son. I taught him not to cry for no reason. He learned faster than his sister. My hands were shaking now. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since you've been too lazy to do your job as a mother." Patricia sat down in the rocking chair like she belonged there. "Someone has to teach them proper behavior." I looked at my twins, really looked at them. Emma was still trembling slightly. Ethan was too quiet, too withdrawn for a 3-week-old baby. How long had this been happening while I slept? While I recovered from surgery that nearly killed me. "You need to leave," I said quietly. Patricia laughed. "I'm not going anywhere. Marcus asked me to help, and that's what I'm doing." "You're obviously not capable of handling twins on your own." I said. "Leave." "Or what? You'll call your husband? He already knows you're struggling." "Who do you think suggested I take a more active role in raising the babies?" The words hit like ice water. "Marcus knows you're doing this?" "Marcus knows his children need structure. He was raised properly, and look how he turned out." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Now, give me Ethan. It's time for his feeding, and you clearly don't know the proper schedule." I backed toward the door, holding both twins. "No. Sarah, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Get out of my house. This is my son's house. You're just living in it." Her voice turned cold again. "And until you prove you can be a competent mother, I'm staying." I realized then that this wasn't just about helping with the babies. This was about control. About proving that I wasn't good enough for her son, wasn't good enough to raise his children. Patricia had been waiting for me to fail, and when I didn't fail fast enough, she decided to make sure I did, but she'd made one critical mistake. She'd hurt my children. And that changed everything. I called Marcus first. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone while balancing both twins against my chest. "Marcus, I need you to come home right now." "Sarah, I'm in the middle of a client meeting. Can't this wait?" Your mother was shaking the babies violently. "I need her out of our house immediately." Silence. "Then, what do you mean shaking them?" "I mean she was holding Emma and shaking her back and forth like a rag doll. She said she was teaching them discipline. They're 3 weeks old, Marcus." Another pause. "Mom's just old school about child rearing." "Maybe you misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand anything." My voice was getting louder. Emma stirred in my arms, and I forced myself to speak more quietly. "She admitted it. She said she's been doing it while I sleep. She said you asked her to take a more active role." "I asked her to help because you've been overwhelmed." "Did you tell her to shake our babies?" "Of course not, but Sarah, you've been emotional since birth. The medication, the hormones, he was doing it. He was actually choosing his mother over his children's safety. Over me telling him our babies were being hurt. Come home now, or I'm calling the police." "Don't threaten me, Sarah. We can discuss this when I get home like adults." "Adults don't shake infants, Marcus. Adults protect them." I hung up and immediately called the one person I knew would believe me, would understand the gravity of what was happening. My father, David Mitchell. Dad picked up on the first ring. "Sarah? Everything okay?" "Dad, I need help." The words came out in a rush. Patricia was shaking Emma and Ethan. Like, violently shaking them. "She says it's discipline, but Dad, they're 3 weeks old. And Marcus won't come home. He thinks I'm being emotional." The silence on the other end was different from Marcus's silence. This was the silence of a trained operative processing threat assessment. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "Are the babies hurt?" His voice was calm, professional. "I don't think so," but Emma was terrified. "Ethan seems withdrawn. Dad, I don't know how long she's been doing this." "Where is she now?" "In the kitchen, acting like nothing happened. She refuses to leave." "And Marcus?" Won't come home. Says. I'm being hormonal. Another pause. When Dad spoke again, his voice had changed. It was the voice I remembered from childhood when someone at school tried to hurt me. Protective. Dangerous. I'm 40 minutes away. Do not let her alone with those babies for 1 second. If she tries to take them from you, you lock yourself in a room and call 911. Do you understand me? Yes. Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. Get your phone and start recording every interaction with her from now until I get there. Don't tell her you're doing it, just record. Can you do that? Yes, but Dad, sweetheart, I need you to trust me on this. What you're describing isn't just bad parenting advice. Someone who shakes infants has done it before. This might be bigger than just today. The weight of his words settled over me. What do you mean? I mean I'm going to make some calls while I drive. Professional calls. And Sarah? If she tries to leave before I get there, you don't let her. How do I stop her? You tell her your father is David Mitchell, former Navy SEAL, current FBI, and he's already on his way. Trust me, if she's smart, she'll wait. I looked down at my twins, both finally sleeping peacefully in my arms. They looked so small, so vulnerable. The thought that someone had hurt them, that someone might have been hurting them for days while I recovered from surgery, made my chest burn with rage. Dad? Yeah, sweetheart? Hurry. On my way. And Sarah? You did the right thing calling me. What happened today stops today. After I hung up, I walked back to the kitchen where Patricia was washing bottles like this was any other Tuesday afternoon. Was that Marcus? She asked without looking up. No. That was my father. She glanced over her shoulder. Your father? What does he have to do with anything? I started the recording app on my phone, holding it low so she couldn't see. He's coming. Over. Well, I suppose he can meet his grandchildren properly. Though I hope he's not one of those overly sentimental grandfathers who spoils children. He's a former Navy SEAL. Current FBI. Patricia's hand stilled in the soapy water. She turned around slowly. I told him what you did to Emma and Ethan, I continued. He's very interested in meeting you. For the first time since I'd known her, Patricia Whitmore looked genuinely afraid. Patricia tried to leave 20 minutes after I told her my father was coming. She announced she suddenly remembered an important appointment and needed to get home to change clothes. You can't leave, I said, standing between her and the front door with both twins in my arms. I most certainly can. This is ridiculous, Sarah. You're blowing everything out of proportion. My father specifically asked you to wait. Your father has no authority over me. But her voice was shaking. Actually, he does. FBI agents have authority over people who hurt children. She paled. I didn't hurt anyone. I was providing discipline to 3-week-old babies. While I was recovering from surgery. I kept recording, holding my phone low. Patricia was pacing now, checking her watch every few seconds. This is insane, she muttered. Completely insane. Marcus won't stand for this. Marcus isn't here. He chose not to be. The doorbell rang. Patricia jumped like she'd been electrocuted. That'll be my dad. I opened the door to find not just my father, but 2 other men in suits. Dad looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd spent 20 years in special operations and another 10 in federal law enforcement. The other 2 looked like they'd stepped out of a recruitment poster. Sarah. Dad hugged me carefully, mindful of the babies. These are Agents Morrison and Chen from my unit. I hope you don't mind, but I thought the situation warranted some backup. Agent Morrison, a tall black man with kind eyes and an intimidating presence, smiled at me. Congratulations on the twins, Mrs. Whitmore. Beautiful babies. Agent Chen, Asian American with the build of someone who spent serious time in the gym, was already scanning the room with professional attention. Patricia stood frozen in the hallway, her purse clutched in her hand like a shield. Mrs. Whitmore. Dad said, his voice polite but steel hard. I'm David Mitchell. I believe you've been caring for my grandchildren. Yes. I've been helping. That's interesting, because my daughter tells me your version of helping involves shaking infants. That's not, she misunderstood, Mrs. Whitmore. Agent Morrison interrupted gently. Why don't we all sit down and talk about this? I'm sure there's been some kind of miscommunication. Patricia looked between the 3 men and seemed to shrink. I don't have to talk to you. You have no right, actually, Agent Chen said, pulling out a badge. We have every right to investigate reports of child abuse. And when that abuse is reported by the child of a federal agent, it gets priority attention. I watched Patricia's face cycle through emotions, fear, anger, calculation. She was looking for an exit that didn't exist. Now, Dad continued, settling into the living room like he owned it. Sarah recorded your conversation after the incident. Would you like to hear it? You recorded me. Patricia's voice shot up an octave. I recorded myself, I corrected. You just happened to be talking. Agent Morrison gestured toward the couch. Mrs. Whitmore, please sit down. We have some questions. I want to call my son. Of course. But first, let's clarify a few things. Agent Chen opened a tablet. Patricia Ann Whitmore, age 64, formerly Patricia Kellison. Patricia's face went white. How do you, Mrs. Whitmore, were you employed as a nanny in Riverside, California, between 1987 and 1989? That was a long time ago. Were you terminated from that position? Patricia sat down hard, like her legs had given out. There was a misunderstanding. Agent Morrison leaned forward. What kind of misunderstanding involves the emergency? Hospitalization of a 6-month-old infant. I felt my blood turn to ice. What? Dad looked at me. While I was driving over, I had the team run a background check. There were some irregularities in Mrs. Whitmore's employment history. The baby had shaken baby syndrome, Agent Chen continued, reading from his tablet. The family accused Mrs. Whitmore of abuse, but she left the state before charges could be filed. Patricia stood up abruptly. That baby was sick. I had nothing to do with. There were 2 other families, Agent Morrison said quietly. Portland, Oregon, 1991. Denver, Colorado, 1994. Both nanny positions. Both terminated after incidents involving infants and suspicious injuries. I couldn't breathe. You've done this before. Multiple times. I never heard anyone, Patricia said, but her voice was barely a whisper. The pattern suggests otherwise, Dad said. 3 families, Mrs. Whitmore. 3 families who trusted you with their children, and 3 families who had to rush babies to emergency rooms. Where's your son in all this? I asked. Does Marcus know? Patricia's face crumpled. Marcus doesn't know anything. I never told him about the other jobs. So when you married his father, you just disappeared your past? I started over. I became a good wife, a good mother. Marcus turned out fine. Agent Chen looked up from his tablet. Mrs. Whitmore, did you ever seek treatment for anger management or impulse control issues? I don't have anger issues. Children need discipline, 3-week-old children need protection, Dad interrupted. They need adults who understand that crying is communication, not manipulation. Patricia looked around the room at 4 adults. Who weren't buying her excuses, weren't making allowances for her behavior, weren't treating her like a misunderstood grandmother. I want to call Marcus, she said again. Go ahead, I said, holding my twins closer. Call him. Tell him what these agents just told us. Tell him about the other babies you hurt. For the first time since I'd known her, Patricia Whitmore had nothing to say. Marcus walked in 30 minutes later to find his mother sitting between 2 FBI agents while a third took her statement. I was in the kitchen with Dad, both twins sleeping peacefully in their carriers after being checked by a paramedic. Dad had somehow arranged to show up. What the hell is going on here? Marcus demanded, looking around the living room like he'd walked into the wrong house. Your mother has some explaining to do, Dad said calmly. To you and to these agents. Marcus looked at Patricia, who was crying quietly into a tissue. Mom? What's happening? Agent Morrison stood up. Mr. Whitmore, I'm Agent Morrison, FBI. We're investigating reports that your mother physically abused your children. Abused? That's insane. My mother would never, Marcus, I interrupted, she was shaking them. I saw her do it. She admitted it. You're being ridiculous, Sarah. Mom was just helping by giving 3-week-old babies discipline? Dad's voice cut through Marcus's protests. Son, you need to listen to what these agents found. Agent Chen looked up from his notes. Mr. Whitmore, were you aware that your mother was terminated from 3 different childcare positions for suspected abuse? Marcus stared at him. What, 1987, 1991, and 1994? 3 different states. 3 different families who reported injuries to infants in your mother's care. That's not possible. Marcus turned to Patricia. Mom, tell them that's not true. Patricia looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Marcus, sweetheart, it's not what it sounds like, it's exactly what it sounds like, Agent Morrison said. Mrs. Whitmore has a documented history of harming infants. Today, she continued that pattern with your children. Marcus sat down hard in the nearest chair. This can't be real. Your wife called us because she caught your mother violently shaking your daughter Emma, Dad said. When Sarah confronted her, your mother said she was teaching the baby not to be spoiled. Emma is 3 weeks old, Marcus. I need to see the recording, Marcus said quietly. I pulled out my phone and played the audio. Patricia's voice filled the room, teaching her not to be a brat. Babies need to learn they can't manipulate people with crying. A little discipline never hurt anyone. Marcus's face went through several colors as he listened. When it finished, he looked at his mother like he'd never seen her before. You actually said that? About Emma? Patricia reached for his hand. Marcus, you have to understand, he pulled away. I don't understand. I don't understand any of this. How could you hurt my children? I was trying to help them become better. Babies, they're 3 weeks old. Marcus exploded. They're supposed to cry. They're supposed to need things. That's what babies do. Agent Chen cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore, there's something else you should know. Your mother has been lying to your family for over 30 years about her past. What do you mean? She told you she worked in an office before she married your father, correct? Marcus nodded. She actually worked as a nanny for multiple families. Families who fired her for harming their children. When the last family threatened to press charges, she fled Colorado and created a new identity. Created a new identity? She changed her name, moved across the country, and married your father 6 months later. You've never known who your mother really is. Marcus looked at Patricia with complete bewilderment. Is that true? Patricia was crying harder now. I wanted to start fresh. I wanted to be a good wife and mother. I changed, Marcus. I raised you properly, you raised me on a lie, Marcus said quietly. Everything I thought I knew about you is a lie. Agent Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Whitmore, your mother's behavior today wasn't an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. It was part of a pattern that goes back decades. She's been hurting babies for over 30 years. Marcus stood up and walked to where I was holding the twins. He looked down at Emma and Ethan like he was seeing them for the first time. Did she hurt them badly? He asked me. I don't think there's permanent damage, but Marcus, they were terrified. Emma was screaming, and Ethan was too quiet afterward. Like he was afraid to cry. Marcus's jaw tightened. He turned back to Patricia. Get out. Marcus, please, get out of our house. Get out of our lives. I never want to see you again. But I'm your mother, my mother wouldn't hurt my children. My mother wouldn't lie to me for 30 years. I don't know who you are, but you're not my mother. Patricia looked around the room desperately. You can't all be against me. I was trying to help, Mrs. Whitmore, Agent Morrison said gently. You're going to need to come with us. There are charges being filed. Charges? Child endangerment. Assault on a minor. And we'll be reopening those cases from California, Oregon, and Colorado. Patricia stood up shakily. This is all a mistake. A terrible mistake. Dad stepped forward. The only mistake was trusting you with innocent children. Multiple families made that mistake, and now it stops. As the agents led Patricia toward the door, Marcus called out, Mom? She turned hopefully. Don't ever contact us again. Don't call, don't write, don't show up. You're dead to us. Patricia's face crumpled, but she didn't argue. She just let the agents escort her out of our house and out of our lives. Marcus sank back into his chair and put his head in his hands. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I should have believed you immediately. I should have come home. I looked at my husband, seeing him clearly for the first time in weeks. Yes, you should have. How do I fix this? Dad answered before I could. Son, you start by understanding that your wife just saved your children from someone who's been hurting babies for 3 decades. And then you make damn sure something like this never happens again. Marcus nodded, tears in his eyes. Never again. I promise. I hoped he meant it. But trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Even when the person you love finally chooses the right side. 3 months later, Patricia Whitmore was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison after pleading guilty to child endangerment charges. The cases from California, Oregon, and Colorado were reopened, and investigators found 2 more families who'd experienced similar incidents but hadn't reported them at the time. Marcus and I went to counseling. Both together and separately. I need you to understand something, I told him during one of our joint sessions. When I called you that day and told you our babies were being hurt, you chose your mother over them. Over me. Marcus winced. I thought you were overreacting. I thought the medication, no. You thought your mother could do no wrong, and I could do nothing right. That's different. Our therapist, Dr. Angela Rodriguez, leaned forward. Marcus, what do you think would have happened if Sarah hadn't called her father? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. She would have kept hurting them. And I would have kept making excuses for her. So the question is, Dr. Rodriguez continued, how do we make sure Sarah never has to be the only advocate for your children's safety again? It was a good question. And it took months of work to find the answer. Marcus quit the family business and found a job that didn't require 60-hour weeks. He took parenting classes. He learned to change diapers, make bottles, and recognize the different types of crying babies. More importantly, he learned to trust me. The twins thrived. Emma became a happy, gurgling baby who loved peekaboo. Ethan developed an infectious laugh that could brighten the darkest days. Neither showed any lasting effects from those early weeks of trauma, though I sometimes caught myself watching them obsessively for signs of distress. Dad became the grandfather I'd always hoped he'd be. He taught Marcus how to properly hold the babies, how to read their cues, how to be present instead of just providing. He also had our house security system upgraded and gave us both his direct number with instructions to call him immediately if anything ever felt wrong again. "Trust your instincts, sweetheart," he told me one afternoon while holding Emma. "You saved these babies because you listened to what your gut was telling you. Don't ever second-guess that voice again." The hardest part wasn't the legal proceedings, or the counseling, or even rebuilding trust with Marcus. The hardest part was forgiving myself for not recognizing the danger sooner. "You were recovering from major surgery," Dr. Rodriguez reminded me. "You were exhausted, in pain, and dealing with hormonal changes. The fact that you recognized the abuse when it happened and took immediate action shows incredible strength. But what if I hadn't woken up that day? What if she'd kept doing it? But you did wake up. And you did act. And now no other babies will be hurt by her." 6 months after that terrible Tuesday, Marcus and I renewed our wedding vows. Not because our marriage was perfect, but because we'd learned what marriage actually meant. It meant choosing each other over everyone else, including family members who seemed beyond reproach. It meant trusting your partner's instincts even when they contradicted your assumptions. It meant protecting the family you created together. Above all else, Dad walked me down the aisle again, just like at our first wedding. But this time, when the officiant asked who gave this woman to be married, Dad said something different. "She gives herself," he said clearly. "Because she's strong enough to protect herself and the people she loves." In the front row, Emma and Ethan babbled happily in their carriers, surrounded by people who would actually keep them safe. Marcus's vows were different this time too. "Sarah, I promise to believe you when you tell me something is wrong. I promise to trust your instincts about our children's safety. I promise to choose our family first, always, even when it's hard." My vows were simpler. "Marcus, I promise to never stop fighting for the people I love. Even when that fight is against people who should be protecting them too." We didn't invite Patricia to the ceremony. She was still in prison, and even if she hadn't been, she would never be welcome in our lives again. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. The reception was small, just close friends and family members who'd proven they could be trusted with precious things. Dad gave a toast that made everyone cry. "To Sarah and Marcus," he said, raising his glass. "May you always remember that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day to protect what matters most." Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the twins were sleeping peacefully in their cribs, Marcus and I sat on our porch looking at the stars. "Do you think we'll ever fully get past what happened?" he asked. I thought about it. "I think we'll carry it with us," I said finally. "But carrying it doesn't mean it has to weigh us down. It can make us stronger instead." "I love you, Sarah Mitchell Whitmore." "I love you too. But if you ever choose someone else over our children's safety again, my Navy SEAL FBI father will be the least of your problems." Marcus laughed, but we both knew I wasn't entirely joking. Trust takes time to rebuild. But some lessons, once learned, change you forever. And some battles, once fought, make you strong enough to win any war. A year later, when Emma took her first steps and Ethan said his first word, "Dada," which made Marcus cry, I realized we'd built something new. Not the family we'd started with, but the family we'd fought to become, and this time, everyone in it was safe. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.